delighted to be joined by the one and only Val McDermid. Val, thanks very much for coming and talking to us.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Luca.
No, I mean, we've done this a few times now. You're honestly
Yeah,
one of my favorite people to talk to, and you know that. I even went to Blackpool for you.
but we did see the illuminations.
We did. It was nice. It was a nice time of year. It was lovely.
Yeah.
It was great.
I had a very strange encounter after I left you that evening. We got on the tram to go back to our hotel, and there were people on the tram carriage to us, and I thought these people sound like they come from Kirkcaldy or come from Fife, certainly. And one of them turned and said, "Are you Val McDermid?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they said, "You knew my mum." And I turned I knew their mum. I knew their granny. I'd got photographs of myself walking with her mum when she was a toddler, and I was 6 or 7. And I was just like, "You're on the tram, and I'm in Blackpool. Are you stalking me?"
I
Very
mean,
weird.
I mean, that's the thing though, is that I've been around for some of those kind of encounters though, where people will just re recognize you, and there was at a point where you realized you were becoming recognizable, and you had to kind of change the way you acted and stuff like that, or have you ever done that?
Well, I had to start being polite to people in supermarkets.
Yeah.
Just out my fucking way has gone out the window now. Um, but no, yeah, I suppose it's a few years ago now. I think mostly in Scotland initially. I think because of the campaign around the referendum in 2016, I guess I was doing a lot more public facing things then, and people started to get to know me. And I mean, it's really nice because people treat you like you belong to them.
Mm.
Especially if I'm in Fife, where I come from. And Kirkcaldy Joe says they all think you belong to them. They all think you're related to them.
I mean,
I
my
mean, to
favorite
tell you
was
something, we just sold our house right in Edinburgh,
yeah.
and the people who bought it, the husband was sort of a bit shy with us, and then they said, I come from Kirkcaldy as well. I know your cousin Derry. I used to play football with your cousin Derry. Well, for God's sake.
Is it one of those places though that people seem to be like moving away from? No, do you leave? A lot of people leave in Kirkcaldy in that. Is that what it is?
No, it's the same when I go back. The
Yeah.
locals just do that sort of, it's her.
I mean, we can tell. Just we should point out, like your background is usually much better than this, but you're surrounded by moving boxes
Yes.
because you have moved recently. It's not just you've not fallen on hard times and you.
No, no, no. I'm not taking a collection box around for, please, I need bookshelves. I'm in need
I
of
need
bookshelves.
bookshelves. I had to sell my shelves.
No, my shelves are in the joiner's workshop being refitted to the new house.
Yeah, but
So at the
I mean,
moment, the books are in boxes.
I just want to explain this, but we should talk quickly about why you're on the Black Spring Crime YouTube channel to talk about a little bit about Crimebits, which the first one you can see behind me,
Yeah,
Crimebits, but it was guest edited and introduced by Lee Child, and Val, you're doing number two. You're going to
I
be
am a
judging
part of
number
it.
two.
Yes. Yeah, I
Yes.
am. Yeah, I mean, and I'm glad to be doing it because I think it's been a hallmark of my career since I became established myself that I want to support new writers coming through. I know what it's like to be starting out as a writer, to try and get your first break, and there were people who were really supportive and kind to me when I was starting out, and so it's kind of like I was brought up to believe that if you're lucky enough to be successful, you put something back, and so for me, encouraging new writers is something I've done very much since the beginning. And I like it because you get a sense of what people are thinking of, how their brains are working, how they're processing new ways of telling stories. So for me, it's partly selfish, as it keeps my finger on the pulse of what's going on.
I mean, is this something that you would lead in the New Blood panel at the Theakston's Obscurely Crime Festival at Harrogate? I know this is something that is quite close to your heart of encouraging and learning about new writers. And I think that's something that Crime Bits really does because like
Yeah,
there isn't I think there's out of 100 entries in the book, I think only a couple of people have actually been published before and
yeah,
and maybe not at a very high level. This is a very much like 250 words, up to 250 words, the opening of a crime novel. It's available to do for anyone, and anyone can have a go and do it. And it's not that kind of horrible moments of, oh, if I want to be a writer, I've got to write an entire novel.
And I think I mean, it also always reminds me too of something my very first news editor said to me, because I used to be a journalist before I became a writer of fiction. And he always said, you have to grab them in the first paragraph. You have to grab them at the beginning. They have to not just want to read on, but they have to need to read on.
Mm,
And I think that's the sort of idea. People these days have, I mean, our attention spans are fragmented. All around us are other things craving our attention, bright, shiny things. Here's something on your phone. Here's something on another screen. Here's something else going on. Here's a new episode of a series you've been following. It's really hard to grab people's attention and make them read a book right through to the end. So in a sense, you've got to make them really want to, they're going to need to finish the book.
mm.
They're going to need to find out what happens next. And sometimes that comes from character, sometimes it comes from situation. But grabbing them right at the beginning is a good place to start.
Do you feel like time has changed in that you have to grab a reader much quicker than you used to?
Yeah, I still think, most people will give you the courtesy of the first page. But you still have to, there has to be something to make them even read that first page. And I know that I too, I mean, I'm an avid reader and a voracious reader, but even I find now I'm much more inclined to put a book to one side if it's not doing it for me. I mean, it's partly because I had years of being a Scottish Presbyterian and saying, you've started, so you've got to finish. Now I don't feel like that. I now feel that if a book isn't doing its job for me, I'm not obliged to finish it. So in order for readers to get behind you and to carry on with that really valuable word of mouth transmission, you've got to make them want to stay. And that starts right from the first paragraph, the first few sentences from the first page. And if you make them want to stay, they'll tell their pals, I've just read this amazing book. It absolutely gripped me. I couldn't put it down.
One of the things that we did with the first Crimebits was that we kind of expanded it not to just have the openings, is that we put a lot of other stuff in there as well, as like puzzles and trivia
Mm.
and things like that to kind of give anyone who picks it up more of an experience. Um, have you noticed, like, because like the way you kind of look at it now is it's a bit more, it's got like that kind of Myrtle feel to it. Is have you noticed that there is a bit more kind of fun around the crime fiction kind of releases that you've seen, over the years? Like, or is this kind of thing always happened where we try and add things onto the genre and kind of make everyone come along to it?
Well, it's kind of gone back to the beginning. Back in the sort of so-called golden age, there were various attempts to do different things with the crime novel, and there were a lot of things like puzzles that were attached to the story itself. And there was a series of projects, of which I've got one called Murder in Miami, which was a kind of it was a paperback, a big paperback, but there were all sorts of bits and pieces in it along the way. Like there was a letter in an envelope that you take out and read that
Yeah.
was part of the clues, and fingerprints that you had to match. So it's always been part of the ethos, but I think it kind of got kind of lost along the way, probably to do with the costs of printing. But
Hmm.
now I think that's something that's changed. It's been transformed by modern methods of digital printing and digital composition. So it's
Hmm.
become much more possible to return to these old ideas of including the puzzle idea, and people like that. People have
Yeah.
fun doing that. It's not for everybody, but as I say, for those who like that sort of thing, that is the sort of thing that they like, as Miss G. Brody would say.
I think it was a great way of kind of drawing the attention because the puzzles kind of link into what has been written before, and it makes you even examine what those kind of pieces have had to say, which gives only more notice to the authors who wrote them. And I think that's a great thing. And I mean, when I spoke to Lee about this one a few weeks back, that was one of the things he was kind of talking about was he wants those writers to kind of go on and produce and bring out more stuff. But do you think there is for me it isn't a zero sum game. You always kind of pushing for more and more people to try and write because of what it's done for you and in the similar way that I feel.
Yeah, I think it's important that people write when they think they've got something to say. It's the traditional forms of publishing have often been difficult for people to penetrate. If you have a certain ethnic background, for example, if you have a certain class background, these things are hard to get into. They're hard to get your foot across the door in the first place. So I think that anything that opens out that field is a good thing. That people should, if they want to publish, they should be able to publish. And now we have much more access to self-publishing, different forms of publishing, and that's great because if people find an audience, then obviously they have something to say that's worth reading.
Mm.
People will fall by the wayside. That's inevitably the case because not everybody has an equality of talent or an equality of the capacity to learn how to use their talent. But everybody now has, I think, much closer to an equal chance at it. And anything that we do that encourages that has got to be a good thing. The more
I
voices
agree.
that
I
we
agree.
have, the better.
Yeah, I completely agree. Is that when I look at like my own background and the idea that someone from where I come from could write is ridiculous to me and still is. Um, so I am constantly encouraging people from their kind of background to do it because that's what I'm familiar with. And I know other people who've got different backgrounds will do the same for whatever background they have. As you mentioned, ethnic minorities and that type of thing. I think I think
Well, I mean, my own case, I mean, I'm a wee Scottish working class lesbian.
yeah,
There was nobody in my family had ever written anything more than a letter.
yeah.
So there's no suggestion of my family background to say, oh, she's going to grow up and be a marvelous writer. Everything I've achieved, I've done it through reading and learning and watching and trying
Yes.
and failing.
I mean, that's exactly the thing is that like if I'd have never tried, I'd have never been able to do it. And just having the confidence to try was difficult, but I
Yeah,
grew I got to the point where I was like, I have to. It's just something I want to try and do.
yeah.
Um, am I right in saying that you were the first person from a state school in Scotland to go to Oxford, or first woman to?
To go to the particular college I went to, St Hilda's, I was the first Scottish state school pupil to go to St Hilda's.
Did you feel any kind of pressure from that kind of label, or did you not know until afterwards? Did you know beforehand, or?
I kind of knew, but I didn't really think about it much. I was very fortunate. I mean, I grew up in a household where my father was a devotee of Robert Burns, and he was a great believer in Burns's poem "A Man's a Man for All That," which basically says it doesn't matter what your social status is or your wealth. It's what's inside. It's what you do that matters. And so I was brought up with the view that I was as good as anybody else. And so when I went to Oxford, I believed that I must be there because I deserved to be, strange though it seems. And so I saw it as an opportunity that I wasn't going to let anybody take away from me. There were times when I felt very much like a fish out of water, not least because nobody understood a word I said to begin with. I mean, what you hear now is what my partner calls my Radio 4 Scottish accent. But when I went to Oxford, I come for five, came talk like that, we talk awfully fast, we come for five, well, the spins fly backwards to keep the student, and then nobody cares what you're saying, Ken.
I love when
And I had my first tutorial and I started reading out my essay, and my tutor stopped me like two paragraphs in and said, terribly sorry, Miss McDermid, I really haven't understood a word you said. Might you begin again and perhaps a little more slowly this time? So I realized the first thing I had to do was learn to speak English.
yeah.
So I think because I'm a singer, I've always had a reasonably good musical ear and good ear for sort of imitation. So for me, learning to speak in a way that was comprehensible to them was not terribly difficult. But every time I went home in the holidays, I had to just like fall back into talking like five. Ken, I was bilingual.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is that like I know exactly what you're talking about. When I go to my, Scouse family, no one would understand us from outside of Liverpool, and people outside of Liverpool still think I sound terrible now. So I mean, it's and this is
Yeah,
toned down,
yeah,
but there is that kind of small place where you go. This is what I love about the UK is that we have got all of the. If you go to America, they all sound the same to me. It's all like this. No, they're not, but like it all sounds very similar to me. You only have to go down the road in the UK, and it's a completely different accent,
yeah, yeah.
and it's an amazing kind of thing that that happens here. But it's all about going to Oxford and things like that. It's like you didn't feel that pressure. Was when you came out of it though, and you went into journalism, was that kind of was it a bit of an eye-opening experience that you kind of went from one kind of in a safe kind of environment and then you went out into the wide world? Was that a big change for you?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, it was also a very male environment, newspapers. I mean, the training scheme I was on was like 50-50, young women and young men. But when we actually went out into the real world of newspapers, that was quite a different thing. I started off, once I'd gone past my traineeship, I started off in Glasgow, where I was one of only three women reporters in the newsroom. And we were never allowed to be on shift together because if we were on shift together, we'd just sit around and gossip
Oh my
was the attitude. And it was much more pressured in terms of how well you had to do. To be taken seriously, you had to be probably twice as good as the guys. And I always used to say for my years in newspapers, I was paid a large salary not for working a 40-hour week, but for the 5 minutes when I could get across a doorstep that nobody else was going to get across.
God.
And I think that for me, a lack of glamour was a great tool in my toolbox because so women were not threatened by me. They thought I could be their pal. And guys just treated me like their favorite auntie or their big sister or their wee sister. And nobody was unnerved by me. They were not suspicious of me. And because I was also very good at accents, I could fit in quite clearly around with what was going on around me. So yeah, I spotted the pitfalls and tried to avoid them mostly.
Do you miss journalism at all? Is there any kind of thing inside you that would love to go back and do it all again?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. I think for me, I spent most of my years in journalism on a Sunday paper, and on a Sunday paper, you have to be a self-starter. If you go out in a job and you see a gaggle of reporters from another paper, you know you're screwed because you're not going to get an exclusive for Sunday's paper. So I was accustomed to working on my own, and then later I was Northern Bureau Chief, and again that was very much working on my own. So I think because I was a woman, I felt like an outsider all the time, and I kind of tailored my role to suit that position. So I never had quite the level of camaraderie that the guys had. So I always felt kind of like I was a bit of an outsider. And I sometimes think that goes back to my childhood, because when I was a kid, I used to spend my weekends and my school holidays at my grandparents, who lived 8 miles away. And so I had weekend friends and week friends, so I had the school friends, but then at the weekend I was in a different place. So I kind of had a foot in both camps and belonged really in neither. So I was kind of accustomed to being self-reliant. And so as I say, I emerged from newspapers with that sort of self-reliance exacerbated. So being a writer sitting on my own in a cupboard is quite all right, really. I don't I
You
don't miss
see,
that aspect of it at all. But I do like the social side of the crime world, which
well,
is
that's what I was going to say. Is that it's much more social than I thought it was going to be.
yeah. But that only happens sometimes. I mean, it's not like it's every day. It's not
No.
like every day it's 12 o'clock, we're all going to the pub.
Yeah.
It's something that we go to festivals, we see each other, we have a good time.
Yeah.
We're doing an event with someone, we go out and have dinner, we have a good time, and it's lovely. I really enjoy that aspect of it, and I really missed it in this last year because I've not been out very much this last
Mm,
year, and I certainly missed it in lockdown. That kind of hanging out together, not necessarily
mm.
talking about publishing or what we're doing, but just the kind of we have certain ways of looking at the world in common, I think.
There's always a moment at like the end of September, beginning of October when the festivals kind of stop and the events kind of draw to like, and I'm always I'm always missing it instantly because it's like, oh, I'm not going to see my mates for ages now. And you
Yeah.
start looking for reasons why you might need to. So you start going like, "We'll do a book event in the arse end of nowhere because because they've asked us to do it. There'll be three people there, but at least we'll be together." It's
Yeah, I think for me living in Edinburgh, that's not quite so extreme because there's a lot of writers in Edinburgh and
yeah,
around, and so we bump into each other at things, or like if Doug's doing an event at Portobello Books, I'll go down and watch him, and if I'm doing an event someplace, he'll come and see me. So there's
yeah.
a certain amount of crossover. But I think if you live somewhere where there's not very many of your fellow writers about, I think you are quite lonely.
It's me and Dave Jackson, and at some
Right.
point we've got to stop seeing each other.
Look, people are talking, Luca.
Yeah, we had dinner the other night. It was lovely.
Did he walk you
Yeah.
home?
No, he can walk himself home these days. No, it is a very strange thing, though. I mean, I mean, like I think is it we've either gone past or we're approaching 40 years since your first novel was published.
Yeah, it's 1987, so a couple of years to the 40th anniversary, but certainly 40 years since I first submitted it.
What do you
Um,
think? How much do you think publishing has changed in that time?
it's changed a lot. I think in some ways the gatekeepers have become less powerful. When I first started, it was really, really hard to get a foot in the door. If you didn't have an agent, it was really hard to get an agent. Um, I got my first book paid attention to. I mean, wasn't the first book I wrote, it was the third book I actually wrote. But I actually got someone to take a look at it because someone I knew from university was going out with somebody who worked at the Women's Press who knew an editor. And so she put the book in front of the editor at the Women's Press, and that was how it got paid attention to. I mean, if I just submitted that to the slush pile, chances are it would just nothing would have happened. So it did help that I knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody.
Mm,
I think that has got slightly easier because there are more routes into being paid attention to because there are things like Crimebits that will draw attention to someone who's got that spark. Um, I think the business is in a state of flux at the moment. I think AI has really put the cat among the pigeons in so many respects. I mean, I read a story today about a new publishing house that's set up, planning to publish 8,000 books next year
so yeah.
with AI. Anybody who wants a book written, if they submit their manuscript in whatever kind of state, they'll apply the AI to it, and out the other end of the sausage machine will come a book. Chances are nobody will buy it, nobody will read it, but nevertheless, they'll have taken $5,000 off you.
Mm,
And people are desperate to become published writers.
yeah.
Uh, so I think there are routes now that are easier into the business, and if you get your foot across the door, then the chances are, if you've written a good book, there's probably more chance of it being noticed now.
Do you think do you think people are getting less time to make an impact though as a writer than they used to?
Yes, I mean when I started out, if you took my sales for my first three books, I would not have a career now.
Hmm.
My sales were not good at all. Um, and I think now, if you don't do well with your first, second book, your history. And it worries me. There's an awful lot of people getting a lot of money punted at their first novels.
Hmm.
And then you read the second novel and it's really not very good because they've not had the time and they've not had the attention
Hmm.
that the first one got in the process. And then by the third book, nobody's buying their books. I've seen so many careers crash and burn on like book three, book four that you never hear from again. People that I've had on my New Blood panel that
Yeah.
we've never heard from again. Everybody talks about the people that went through New Blood and have gone on to have a stellar career. But there's quite a lot of people who did not go on to have a stellar career.
Hmm.
And I think editorial standards are not what they were. When I started out, you worked with your editor. The editor worked closely with you to try and make your books as good as they could be. I think there's much less attention paid at that level to people who are not already deemed to be a banker, if you like.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure how people get into or people reach the positions they reach in publishing houses anymore because sometimes they seem to just arrive from nowhere and seem not always to have a thorough grounding in the constructions of sentences.
Which is kind of important. Do you think that do you think there'll be a self-correction, or do you think we're on a path now where this is like the new normal and it'll be like this for a long time?
I think there will be a self-correction. I think every single change in the way we consume books, the way we consume words, has led to a difficult period and has led to people going around saying, "Oh, it's the end of the world as we know it." I'm sure when Gutenberg did the first sort of printing project, everybody was sitting there going, "Well, that'll be the end of oral storytelling. Nobody's going to sit around a fire on a Saturday night telling stories anymore, are they?" So I think it's been as long as there's been any sort of changes in say, the way we consume words and books and literature and storytelling. It's always been doom and gloom. and
Yeah.
there are teething problems, and we get past it and we adjust to something different. So, and I mean, same way now that there's been a huge upsurge in audiobooks. I mean, I can remember when I was starting out, everyone's going, "Oh, nobody's going to be reading, no, nobody's going to be listening to books. We'll just do these abridged versions, and they'll give them the gist of the story."
Yeah.
Partly because originally they were on cassette tapes, and you had to have
Yeah.
like 24 cassette tapes for a book, carrying around a box under your arm, which wasn't the most easy way to consume things. But these things go through fashions, go through changes, and the novel is still with us.
Yeah. Do you
People are
think?
still sitting around and reading Charles Dickens. They're still sitting around and reading
Yeah.
Tolstoy, as well as what's just won the Booker Prize.
I mean, that's the thing is that like the classics are still the classics. They've just become more of them. In
Mm,
100 years' time, there'll be new ones, but they'll still be reading the old ones as well.
yeah.
Mainly because English teachers at GCSE level need to teach their students something, and it seems to be the same thing. Honestly, I was taught. I'm not going to get into it, but I was at a parents' evening recently, and I got really annoyed because it would seem.
How
I said,
unlike
"I
you,
did
Luca.
this. I learned this, but it
Yeah.
was 25 years ago."
Well, yeah. I mean, some subjects just don't move as fast as others.
No. So, going back, what point did you think that okay, there's a career here, and I might have a career for a long time now? Was it the mermaid
Well,
singing?
yeah, I think it was the point where I thought I might be able to make a living was when we did the deal for the first two Kate Brannigan books.
Hmm.
Because I did Julia Wisdom at HarperCollins bought the first two Kate Brannigan books, and I went back from the meeting on the train, literally on the back of an envelope, worked out that if I could write two books a year, which I thought I could do because there were no other calls on my time because there were no book festivals in those days. If you got a gig at a library, that might pay your grocery bill for a week. So I went back on the train and I figured out that if I wrote two books a year at that advance, I could pay my mortgage and feed myself. And I thought, fuck it, I'm going to go for it.
Uh,
And so I went back and handed in my notice, and everybody threw up their hands in horror and said, "You're completely mad," including my agent, which filled me with confidence. But I'm determined. I was determined I was going to do it. And I gave up smoking, and I gave up buying CDs, and I gave up buying books, and I started making homemade wine. And the book that sort of that broke me out was, as you said, The Mermaid Singing, which won the Gold Dagger for Best Crime Novel of the Year, which I was astounded by. But what that did for me was give me access to many more foreign rights, because my agent was very good at selling foreign rights, and foreign publishers, they love a book that wins prizes because
hmm.
it kind of leapfrogs the situation of having to get a local reader to say, "Is this any good?" Because if you know something's won the Gold Dagger or
Yeah.
Theakston's Barrel, it's probably a good book, so you can take a punt on it. And it took me till uh, nearly 10 years after I quit the day job to for my earnings to equal what I was earning in newspapers.
Wow. Wow. Well, that is a long time. Do you feel like?
I
Do you
started
feel
smoking again
like?
by then.
Yeah. I was on heroin by that point.
I'm drinking proper wine again.
Yeah. Do you think that do you look back now at that time now as a great grounding for what would come later? It's like you never kind of if you'd have been that successful from day one, do you think you'd have been a very different writer now than you would be without that with the way it went?
I suspect I would be a less good writer than I am now. I mean, I had a great editor in Julia to begin with the early years, who really made me work at making my book. And she was an exacting editor, and I think I learned a lot about story structure. I learned a lot about how to create character. And if someone had just been tossing money at me saying, "This is marvelous, darling, this is marvelous,"
Mm,
I wouldn't have done the work. So I would not have. I think I'm a rather better writer now than I was then, and I don't think that I would necessarily have made those strides had I had somebody just tossing money at every book saying, "This is great, more of the same, please." And that was the other thing too, that with Julia, I had an editor who encouraged me to do different kinds of things. When I was writing the Kate Brannigans, and when I started to write, when I said I wanted to write The Mermaid Singing, She said, "Well, I think you're smart enough to do this, and I think you've got enough talent to do this. I'm not going to give you an advance until you've written the first draft, but I think you can do it." Uh, and she encouraged me to write that, to write standalones, and to develop my skills in different directions, to find ways to tell other stories that I had pressing in my head. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes if you write a couple of books and they do well, all your publisher wants from you is more of the same.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to put your finger on series that have run out of steam.
Hmm. Do you think that's been important as well for you, though? Is that you have written different series, you haven't written the same character every year and just sat down and gone, okay, what's so and so up to this week? You've kind of
Yeah.
moved between these series and you kept it much fresher for yourself in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been driven by, I've got a great idea for a story. Whose
Mm,
story is it?
mm,
And then take it from there. And sometimes, I'll write, two of the same character on the bounce these days, which I didn't used to do. But
mm.
more often than not, it's alternating between different things. I mean, Past Lying was the last Karen Pirie, and then this year I wrote Queen Macbeth. Next year I'm doing another Karen Pirie, and then after that it'll be 1999. So I like to move around to keep my imagination fresh, and also when I come back to a character, I'm not bored with them.
Do you not ever feel any pressure from from readers who fall in love with these characters though and just want more and more and more of the same? Do you feel any of that pressure?
Um, it's not up to them because if my heart's not in it, people, if I wrote books because people in my head, they wouldn't be very good books. So the
Hmm.
readers get pretty fed up with that pretty quickly, I think. If I wrote a couple of Karen Piries because I had to write them, they'd be saying, "Oh, they've really got off the boil, those Karen Pirie books. I don't think I want to read them anymore." And we all know series like that they've gone off the boil and we just stopped reading them.
Yeah, I think you're right in that, and Lee Child said the same thing, in that he just ran out of energy writing those books because he was writing the same. He was writing the character of like the same character, and he did it for 25 years, and he said I just ran out of energy for that character,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that I, I think readers don't see that side of it, do they?
Yeah, you've got to be excited to spend time in the company, and you've got to enjoy that process. And if you're not having fun with it, then it shows. I think it's immediately obvious that you're just going, "Oh God, here we go again." Um, and I think, I mean, I got the point with Tony Hill and Carol Jordan where I thought I have put them through so much. I mean, I can't bear the thought of doing more damage to them. They're entitled to go off and recover, for God's sake. Go off into the Yorkshire countryside, walk the dog, relax,
Yeah.
enjoy themselves, recover from their PTSD, for God's sake.
I mean, that's the thing. At some point, it's like, just enough, please, enough.
Yeah,
It is interesting though. It's like having those different series. Is that it says when I've spoken about you when you're not around about you as a writer, is that I talk about I often talk about like the ability that you have to create characters that are instantly you connect with as a reader. To do that
that
over and
that
over
pop,
again. It's
right?
to do that over and over to have that reader have that experience is something I don't think many writers do or can do in crime fiction, and I think that's something that I think is something that is unique almost to yourself.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. I think a lot of it comes back to years of journalism. Having, sometimes you're with people for quite a short period of time, and you've really got to figure out what the story is here, what's going on here, get a handle on who they are in the world. And I suppose that I mean, I'm naturally curious. I mean, I'm nosy. I want to know what makes people tick. Um, we were talking earlier about I didn't get to Harrogate this year, and you mentioned something in passing that I hadn't heard about, and I'm like, what was that? I missed that. Fill me in. Uh, so I'm curious. I like to see the way people interact, and that intrigues me and interests me.
Do you do you foresee? you've got, I mean, like we've only had the two in that series is in 1979, 1989. Do you see, or do you have any ideas for further series, a new series completely at all, or are you happy with the Karen Pirie
I won't,
and that's it?
I won't know till it happens.
Wow. So it can just happen.
Yeah, it's about having the story. I mean, if I
Yeah.
get a story that I want to tell that doesn't sit in the realm of the characters I already have, then I have to create a new character. And then
Wow.
sometimes other stories arrive for that character. With Karen Pirie, that's kind of how it happened. I mean, she's got a minor but very important role in The Distant Echo.
Mm.
And a couple of years later, I had the idea for A Darker Domain. And I thought, oh, it's going to need a cold case detective in Fife. Oh, I've already got one. I'll just use her. Uh, but that's genuinely how it started. And once you've given them, I suppose, enough volume as a character, then other possibilities suggest themselves for them. The story arrives, you think, oh yeah, that'll suit her fine. So it's really a matter of if when something comes along, and I think that's not going to work for Karen, it's not going to work for Ali Burns. It's not. It needs a new voice. And things come in all sorts of strange directions. I mean, we're currently in development with a reboot, an update of Brannigan, where it's Kate Brannigan in her 50s.
Oh, wow.
It would now be, and that's a really exciting idea to play with.
Yeah.
If that takes off, or even if it doesn't take off, the
It's still
seed that
fun.
I planted in my brain,
Yeah.
what's Kate Brannigan doing at 55?
Yeah.
You know,
Oh my God, that's awesome.
so stuff comes along, stuff happens, that puts you back in a different place or takes you forward into another different place.
See, one of the things that I asked Lee was, would he have still retired if he'd have been writing about other characters? I mean, you don't have any plans to stop?
No,
Good.
what would I
I
do
mean
all
that
day? I mean,
that that came out of nowhere. I was just like, I was a really selfish read.
yeah.
Good.
No, see, yeah, I mean, it's like Joe would like Joe would run away if I had nothing to do all day. I'd just annoy her. I'd drive her to the point of insanity. Um, I'm not good at not having something on the go.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a chunk of this year where I've not been well enough to do very much in terms of writing at all. And I get to the end of a day and I think, well, that was another waste of a day. You
Wow.
know, it's I think, people say, cats are obligate carnivores. Cats have got to eat meat and fish, or they get sick and die. And I think I'm an obligate writer. If I'm not writing, I'm bad-tempered and I don't sleep well and all these things. I'm
Is
sorry, but you're stuck with it.
is this the longest period of time where you haven't written anything?
Probably. I haven't not written anything. I've written some, small bits and pieces, and I'm doing
Hmm.
a non-fiction thing for horror at the moment. They're doing a book of 4 seasons where they've come to 4 writers and asked each of us to write about a season. So I'm doing winter.
Hmm.
Michael McFargo's doing spring. Bernard Everest is doing summer. Kate Moss is doing autumn. So that's been a nice wee project. I mean, it's a side project. It's non-fiction, and it's
Yeah.
it's been very different, and I've enjoyed that. But it's been I haven't gone this long without writing a major piece of fiction since, well, probably for about 40 years, and it's weird.
Wow.
And I'm not comfortable with it. I'm really not comfortable with it.
When do, and it's been completely understandable given what's happened this year. I
Mm.
mean, there is something though to be said that you, to have a break might be a good thing.
I hope so. I mean, I hope I'm not going to sit down in January and start the Karen Pirie and going like, I don't fucking know how to do this anymore.
I remember speaking to you years ago and saying to you, when does it get easier? When do you start worrying less about writing and not the business side of things, just in general, like, does it get easier? And you said, I'll let you know when it does.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, God, that was not what I wanted to hear, but it's the absolute truth. Do you
Yeah.
still feel that hand on the shoulder, that tap on the shoulder to say, like,
Yeah.
that's enough now?
No. I mean, no, I don't think I don't feel that at all. I remember. I mean, I've probably told you this before, but years and years ago when I first met Ruth Rendell, and I was completely tongue-tied and starstruck. And once I said, "I think you're amazing. I love your as many books as you have, it gets easier." And she looked at me as if I was very slow and very stupid, and said, "No, dear, it gets harder." And I didn't entirely understand her at the time, but I do now because if you have any commitment to trying to improve as a writer, to try and see each book as a challenge, then you have to work harder at it.
Yeah. And do you enjoy that work though? Do you enjoy
Yeah.
that is that part of it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I savor it. It's definitely yeah, it's part of the joy of doing it.
See, now, because when there's a really great example of someone who did this. Gillian Flynn wrote Gone Girl, which was her third novel.
Mm,
She wrote two novels before that, absolutely brilliant. I don't, and that's what my opinion was. I was a huge fan of hers.
yeah.
She hasn't written anything since. You don't need to write in that sense. You could just like go and do TV stuff, and you could work on other things and everything like that. You could go back to journalism. You could just be the greatest front woman of a band ever.
Yes, well, that. Yeah.
But instead, you've chosen for the last 40 years to release a book every year.
Yeah,
Do
but
you,
that's
do
what
you,
enjoys. I mean,
is that what it is?
I don't think
Do you enjoy it?
Gillian's not done nothing. I mean, she's been writing screenplays and things, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Yeah. It's you've got to do what drives you. And if it's not the next novel, then you've got to find someone else to do.
Hmm.
And if I reach the point where I don't have any more novels in me, then I'll find something else to do, probably.
I hope that never happens.
Might just lie around on a chaise long and read all day, but
And, well,
that might be boring.
no, it would be. Let's not discuss that because I'm a massive fan, and the idea of not having a Val novel to read is a really bad idea to have for me. So I'm
Yeah.
not having it.
Well, I mean, Queen Mother, they always was always a great fan of Dick Francis, and she always had to have her Dick for Christmas.
That's terrible.
True.
It's true, but it's awful.
It's still terrible.
Talk about the Queen Mother. One of the things that you do have is celebrity fans, and I know you're very happy about some of them. Are you allowed to talk about the member of the royal family who's a massive Val McDermid fan?
Well, Queen Camilla is a fan. There's no doubt about it. She's yeah, she reads my books and she likes my books and she's told me so. So that's very pleasant to hear. It's always pleasant to hear a fan. It doesn't matter if they're the Queen or the person next door or the person
But
on the bus.
I'm just thinking back to like young Val in Kirkcaldy. Like who could you be able to tell that young Val one day the Queen will be telling you that that they are a fan of your books? I mean, that would have.
Well,
How would you even deal
well,
with that? You couldn't.
taking the piss. So I've always got that voice in my ear. Who do you think
Yeah.
you are? Um, I mean, genuinely, always touched when readers tell me how much they've enjoyed the books or what the books have meant to them. And in that sense, it doesn't matter if it's the Queen or just somebody who stops you on the bus. And people say extraordinarily kind things. And I've had some amazing mail over the years about things that books have meant to people in individual circumstances. And that is something that does land, if you like. I mean, one of the things that because I'm open about my sexuality, and because gay characters appear in my books without being it's a gay character.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had an awful lot of queer people talk about the importance of my books to them, and that means an awful lot to me. I've been at events where people have come up to me in tears because of what they've experienced in my books, and that matters really almost more to me than anything else.
That's amazing. That is amazing. I love that kind of thing, and I love the idea that it's still after all this time is it's still moving to you. It still means something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I'm sure you've had the same experience reading books where you've read something that's really touched you where you live, and you want to reach out to the writer and say you did
Yeah,
something special for me there. And sometimes we're lucky enough to get the chance to do that.
yeah. I remember I was thinking about this the other day actually. One of the very first writers I ever spoke to, and it was just on social media, was Steve Mosby. And because I read 50/50 Killer and I absolutely loved it. And I remember ringing Emma in work and saying, "You'll never guess what Steve Mosby has replied to my message." She was like, "What does that mean?" But for me, it was like this huge thing. It was like this, like, oh my God, like I reached out and now it's like, I can't. I know it happens for readers that I speak to now, and it is, and I always reply because I know how much it meant to me.
Yeah,
But the amount of people that you'll have done that for over the years is probably unimaginable. It's like, and I know just from talking to people how admired you are, how respected you are. Um, and yeah, you kind of, as a younger writer who feels much older than he is, you kind of look up you want to become that. That's the thing for me is that like I've been doing this for 10 years now, but I still feel like I'm wet behind the ears. I feel like I've been doing it for 5 minutes, but it's because of the kindness of people like yourself and others. That's the reason, like why I keep doing it. It's because I want to get to that level as well.
yeah. But I mean, you know what? I still feel like that about other people's work. I
Mm,
mean, I just finished Ali Smith's new book, Glyph, recently, and it moved me to tears.
yeah,
And that still happens to me, and I'll still um, feel that sense of absolute connectedness to another writer's work, and
yeah.
I hope that never stops as well.
So the
It's
next
that's
Karen
the thing about
Pirie,
books that they bring us together.
yeah,
They bring us together in a way that nothing else does.
I agree. I completely agree. There's something that I think they're magic. I think there's something magical about them, and I think that
Mm.
for me is that's why I was a reader as a kid because I was able to escape into these magical worlds that
Yeah.
didn't replicate now. It's why I tell stories now because I like to escape by writing them. It's like
Yeah.
it's all like it's all magic to me in the way you can connect to people through words. It's just something really magical about the whole thing.
It's what Stephen King calls it portable magic.
Yeah,
A
and I
book
think
is
he's right.
portable magic.
Val, before we wrap up, the new Karen Pirie will be out next year in October.
Yeah.
Before that, is the TV series going to be out before that?
Yes,
The
there'll be a
second
TV
series.
series. Karen Pirie 2 will be out at the beginning of the year. I'm not got a transmission date yet, but it'll be January or February. More likely to be February, I think.
I absolutely loved it, and I thought she was
Yeah.
amazing. Lauren Lyle's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Is that
They
who
did.
did? She didn't match what you had in your head, I don't think, though,
No,
did she?
she's nothing like the Karen Pirie in my head in terms of her physicality, but she embodies Karen's personality. She
Yeah,
captured her perfectly. That's great. And the other actors in the front of the team, the actor who plays Phil, the actor who plays the Mint, they're
yeah,
great. They're very different from my imagination, but they capture who these people are. So it doesn't matter what they look like.
no,
It's the person that they project. And I think I was very lucky that they made such good looking television out of it. And from what I've seen in the second series, I've seen a rough cut of the new series, and I think it's terrific. I think
I
people will love
can't
it.
wait. I cannot wait. I was messaging you when it was on, wasn't I? Me and
Yeah,
Emma got so into it, and I was messaging her, "This is brilliant, man!" And then Emma's going, "Just make sure you say it's not as good as the books, though."
yeah, yeah. Well, it's not as good. It's not as good as the books. I mean, it's not as good as the books because the books let you do it inside your own head.
Exactly, yeah. I just thought she was outstanding. I thought she was brilliant.
Yeah.
And do you think it'll change anything about change the way you write the books at all, or do you not have any crossover that kind
No,
of thing?
no, I don't think so. My Karen is never going to have a bum bag.
I quite like the bum bag. I miss bum bags. I remember when they were really popular, and I think I got one just as everyone else had stopped using them. So I was the one. What am I gonna do?
Story of
I,
your life, Luca.
It's the story of my life. So you can still enter for Crimebits 2, and Val will read and judge your entries. All the information will be in the description of this video. But Val, I just want to say thank you. It's been great to see your face, because I haven't seen you for ages. And
See you, Luca.
you know how much I love you, and you know how much I admire your work, especially. I'm a huge fan. I hope everything you said in this was true, and that you're never going to stop writing, that you live forever, and I can keep reading for whatever
Yeah.
new character you come up with. Into you can go until I go before, because I'm going to die before you, and then then you can stop. I'll let you.
Well, now I've got my back fixed, I can live forever.
Exactly, you bionic woman.
I am. I am. Yes. One of our colleagues sent me a mug when I'd had my surgery that says Bionic Spine Club. I use it every day.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us, and remember to get your entries in for Crime Bits 2. And yeah, Val, I'll see you soon, okay?
Okay. See you, Luca.